Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. Recently, I've been thinking about the world in a different way than usual. I noticed that most of my life throughout the day, in some sense, how can I tell you, the intentions of the day arise from within, and what is within is a response-based intelligence. That means, strangely, what I'm trying to say is that I feel how do I say it? I want to say this well. I feel the inner life can take over the outer life. And I feel that the outer life can also dismiss the inner life. And so human beings are struggling for some balance. It's as if we want external progress, but we also want inner advancement. We want things to not be taken away and things just to accumulate and grow. But when we look at the world, it has a cruel side, you know? There's a scene in a show which I really like, and the show is this Japanese show called Shingeki no Kyojin. And there is a scene where a commander is looking at his scared soldiers in a moment where they're all about to be obliterated, you know, kind of destroyed, killed. And so one of the soldiers looks at him and says to the commander says, "This is our last operation. We must all fight," you know. And the soldier says something like, "Why should we fight when we all know we're gonna die? You know, is it meaningless?" And so the commander says, "We will all die, but it is not meaningless." And he goes on to this kind of spiel and this rant about how we find meaning in our lives by raging, by rebelling against the cruel world, by being our authentic selves. Right? It's as if the world, nature has designed you to be something, and the social program, cultural program wants you to be something too. And to be honest, it is the laws of the world that define the ability of the people. There are moments where I have to retaliate against conception. That means sometimes you speak to some people, and even though they might have the best at heart, they don't realize they are making your sky dimmer. You know, it's like anything you can see more out of, action is inspired. Any moment in my life where I saw something was possible, as if I had seen the same sight as many other people, but I felt like there was another parallel reality of access to the same thing. I find that we don't care about our minds as people that much. We're more inclined in being physical people and living a sort of mechanistic, repetitive life rather than realizing we have one lifetime to evolve civilization. As if imagine your your grandkids end up living in the same kind of way as you are, and their grandkids end up living in the same way as you are, and so generation after generation is going by through this historic process of the evolution of the human being, and the human being is not evolving because it is in some sense putting the weight of the world that it has to confront on technology's shoulders. I feel that technological advancements saved us, but on some level also made us unnatural. And they made us unnatural in the sense that rather than evolving and adjusting to the environment, we started to make the environment adjust to us and not realize that the truth of nature is that nature was here first. Nature was here first. Regardless of what system man imposes, there is always a kind of melody in the background that only when the ego realizes its hollowness you will hear it. And so life has so many twists and turns. I switched my mindset from just letting it be something that it's like this. You first feel you have no control, okay? So internally, your reality attempts for control. And then let us say you attain that control. And that control externally manifests. But after that control, you will see whatever world your mind builds, it is being defined by the nature of building the world rather than being in the world it builds. I am saying your attention cannot be named, cannot be shaped, cannot be referred to through any method of language. There is an unknown component to the intelligence of the being which has to do with, it's more like an awareness. It's like awareness is an existential quality. You cannot exist unless there is something aware that it's existing, So it's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, who hears it, And so now it's kind of a playful thing because the world has fallen into man's mind rather than man falling into the world. There's something that religious ideology says that I felt, it's like you got to understand. Secrets exist because the truth was compartmentalized. It's about how much you let the inner reality be free regardless of the outer reality. This was the ultimate aim of yoga, a sort of internal freedom that had nothing to do with your external condition. And so there's a story in, I believe it's in one of the Puranas. It is, I forget the yogi's name, but he's a notable yogi. There's this yogi who's meditating and he's on a Jainist level. What I mean by that, in Jainism, you don't even kill an insect. Okay? And this man is meditating with such discipline, organization, and faith, and inspiration, and all this, and he's trying to step out of the illusion of the world. And so the story goes that this man is meditating until the last second, as he's meditating, excuse me, as he's meditating, he sees there's this pregnant gazelle that jumps in a river, and there was a tiger chasing it. And when the tiger leaves this gazelle, the pregnant gazelle that was in the river, in some sense, like this yogi goes and saves the child of that gazelle, dying gazelle. And so what ends up happening is that this man gets so attached to protecting and nurturing this gazelle that it's as if at the moment of his death, he has this thought, like the gazelle ran away, and he has this thought, where's the gazelle? And so it's as if his next lifetime he's incarnated as a gazelle, as the ancient text suggests, of course, right? Every human being has a unique design to them. It's like you are not like anyone you have met before, and this is why there is so much authorization if you allow it internally for yourself. This division of the inner and outer, there are certain schools of thought that go against it. Like the fact that I'm saying Mr. Within, like that there is something behind your eyes, there's an inner dimension, right? There's certain schools of thought who are looking at me with kind of like their eyes are scolding me as I'm saying that to the audience. Let me tell you why. Because the truth cannot be, it's not conceptual. That's the issue. And anytime a concept entertains, like my attempt is to try to use language as a sort of hammer, like Thor, like as if I borrowed Thor's hammer and I'm trying to slam, not slam, trying to see the a certain I'm trying to comprehend if this civilization was better, how it would be, and based on that sense, I kind of get a sense of what's off, right? Because in some sense, like how can I say it? Our senses make our world at first. Like right now, I'm giving this talk. If anybody in the world was about to give a speech or a talk or whatever, it would be starting from what is real to them, and their articulation comes in how much what is real to them is also real to others, you know. That means if I was speaking a totally different language right now, it would not be real to you, as if what the concepts that I would be saying in a different language, as if the concepts are there, right? But the authorization of the, it's like the mind cannot validate those sounds. And so, in some sense, strangely, we are an accumulated pattern. I have to definitely say this, that looking at life as an artist is not per se a bad idea. Because in life, your attention defines you. And many people don't know this, but you can wield your attention. Now you can be playful in any with the imagery. I personally use the thing that when I'm kind of looking at like the world around me, I'm saying, okay, we're creatures on a rock. Our evolution doesn't have to do with only our awareness and attention to our external environments, but it has to do with an awareness to the origin of our inner environments. The origin of our inner environments was the first moment our conscious mind, in some sense, saw an objective reality, and from that objective reality, how the dance of subjectivity began. And so, really, when I reverse engineered and went to how can I tell you? I ran behind my eyes. There came that day in my life where the world's picture, the film of the world, was not satisfying anymore. I have had many moments where the outer world has reached its limit, and whenever you get bored of the outer reality, you're naturally, internally, you build it. That means when the world ends externally, it does not internally end. You know, when an ancestor passes away, when a relative or someone who passes away, not ancestor, but when somebody close to you passes away, as if they, if you know, if I was to, for example, pass away right now, perhaps I would exist in the memory of some people. Do you see? So it's as if something leaves, but its inner extension, its inner influence remains. And so there came a day where I looked at the sky and I thought it was endless. And I realized the sky is endless, but the body of man ends. These elements that are me in this moment, that is the rare opportunity. You have an atomic existence at the moment. You know, and this atomic existence can lead to sophisticated ways where the world can be, in some sense, opened up subjectively. It has to do with your level of how much you deep down care for life. If one cannot forgive themselves, they cannot forgive the world, and there will endlessly, till the last day, till the last breath, there will be tension. You have to, on some level, know when to fight with the world. I find this is crucial. And you will only know this when there is a sort of atmosphere where your authentic self is allowed. Usually in society, people's authentic self needs to go into a vehicle of a subjective social value, right? Like it's as if I was in right now on a stage, on a podium, speaking like in front of the UN, you know, that would be a totally different attitude and structure of speech, you know. Pretty much, I think it comes down to you wondering, if you are alive and you are here and you're seeing a world, what is there to do with it? And so you can either ask questions or implement answers. When you implement answers, that can be said to be action. When you ask questions, it can be said to be internal action. You can say questions open the mind multidimensionally, answers make it singular. An answer is going towards a singular dimension of truth, right? If I ask you right now, let's say there's like some person appears, you know, and this person says that you can either ask me to tell you the greatest question known to man, or you can ask me to tell you the greatest answer known to man, you know, and it depends on who would choose which, you know. And if you get the answer, you won't know what the question was. You won't know how that truth fits into your life. But if you know the question, you can at least now know the answer, you know. Because there's many moments in our life where why is it that they say like another man's trash is another man's treasure, another man's treasure is another man's trash. Like the reason they say this is because value is divided up based on the viewpoints that see it. That means if a group of people gather around and they're all looking at the same thing, there is power in that idea. But when only one person alone just knows that idea, it's like, what are you going to do with the idea? The idea comes and goes. You know, it's as if there's a lot of great inventions and ideas in the world, kind of like winds of moving between the streets and the houses and everywhere. And a person has to learn to catch the wave. And to catch the wave is a moment of stillness and silence where there is no opinion, and you're kind of trying to see how the world moves your thoughts before you move them, you know. And really, there isn't. It's not identity oriented. That means my firm kind of conclusion is that we are not purely material beings. We are not purely material beings. And so what does that mean? That means, oh my God, it's unknown. We still have work to do as a species. You know, that's what it means, right? It means there are the questions, or evolution is like, think of it this way. It's like the updating of a creature. But as this creature updates, that whole existential dilemma, the whole playground, this battlefield it's on still remains, right? So what that means is it doesn't matter if I ask the question, why are we all here, or if my ancestors do. I'm asking it in the same on the same stage as them. You know, you will notice it. I find every person in some senses they are wise enough to find their real eyes in this life. And the cool thing is that I find before a person dies, nature just gets that moment in. You will experience certain blessings. Every being, it's just like you can't have just pure chaos, you know. That's the thing. That's why it's like it's not, doesn't mean chaos is not here. It doesn't mean difficult things won't happen. It just means difficult things are not the definition of your intelligence. They don't define you. That means some people, the rooms they walk in define them, so they can't walk into many rooms. They have certain limited definitions. They have certain limited fixed assumptions on themselves. So in some sense, when they're in a, let's say, new environment, they are actually not living a new life. They're trying to hold the past from breaking. We human beings do not have enough processing power to compute the meaning of all of existence. What we are left with at best is how we can elegantly open our eyes to the world. That means the world is the world, you know? The world is like you've entered a shop and all the products are already there. How existence is designed, you can say another way of saying reality is given imagination. It's imagination, you don't have to imagine, it's just there. And that's a powerful idea because it has to do from what side of the dualistic spectrum of life you're looking at things. And is it worth to just be aware of the self, to live for yourself? I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I asked her, what do you think, which one do you think is more important, to live for yourself or to live for others? And she told me, just yourself, just focus, live, like it was her belief that it's like it's a solo ride and that's it, right? And so I totally understand how to be a hunter in the world. That's not the problem whether you have a spear in your hand or not, you know? The problem is, where is the hunting leading? Where is all this selfishness leading, you know? Why is the species selling fish? You know, I find that our minds go ignored because we're afraid of the unknown, and because we feel if we deviate from the mainstream, we will be abandoned. I am telling you, a tribe is not meant to always be in pure efficiency. The fact that we think the world is going in a bad direction or a good direction has to do with how we feel we are being in the world. But I find there's another page beyond this chapter of life. I feel human beings, their mind is opening up to the world in more majestic ways. You know, it's as if there's an ancient pattern that has been echoing for a while. You can say evolution is a pattern, a genetical pattern's attempt to remain. And so it's like at some point I realized thoughts are not that important, even though they are our only means of communication. But they are not. They are not here to define. It's like your thoughts are not your overlords. Because people's beliefs, I'm telling you, it rules their life. I have spoken to people that they're trying to be a certain way in the moment that they forget about their authentic intelligence. And so the fastest way to get old is to think you're a thought and that thought not changing. Life is not meant to be just seen in one view. That means any opinion you have, any belief you have, their change has something new to say about it. You know, I find it kind of hilarious, you know, that the world, in history, they say as if mistakes repeat. And I've thought about this. I've thought about this. What if everything, like this was the early days, this was in 2014. I thought, what if my communication, in some sense, whatever I'm saying, like that, my mind has given value and also seen the void. And so when you truly witness emptiness as a being, you become grateful of what is given. And I think divinity, the concept of divinity cannot be real unless the person realizes their existence is happening once. Usually this people get afraid. They're like, oh no, the day happens once, what? I can't go back in time and relive that day, you know? And so you realize, whoa, What kind of life are you painting into the picture of every moment? In what ways are you seeing your cosmos? Because I have had moments where I remember it was a dark moment of my life where I said it to myself. I felt I had my mind had reached the gutters of existence. That means I felt I was pushed to a position, an internal psychological position, where I felt chaos had spoken first. The relationship of the self with the world was that the world wins. And so the self felt as if empty. And so in that emptiness, I looked at my life and I asked myself, what if none of it was there? And this is a level of mystical insight where you can say the psychology of the person from a domain of individual conscious objectivity is wondering about the collective unconscious and the subjective, right? So what it is like I'm saying your thoughts, start treating them as like a bird that has landed on a branch in front of you. Begin to see that what your mind brings to you, or how your mind moves in every moment, has such a magnificent value that it's as if learn from every moment of your being. You know, it's as if there are two students in this life. There are students who study the moment, and there are students who study what's in the moment. And those who study the moment are liberated. And those who study what's in the moment find infinite power. But that infinite power is weak. That means there are certain, like in yogic culture, in Vedic culture, sadhus, you know, these holy men who would seek in intense meditative states, after truly, authentically, and even being intuitively driven by the spirit of the moment, they do attain a certain level of peace and they go past heaven. And when they go past heaven, they become a creature who has seen the edge of they have stepped beyond the language threshold. And as they have stepped beyond the language threshold, they know there is something here more than what they see. They know there is something more than their sensory perception. So the whole psychology's behavior shifts. It's as if it's a trust before you had the concept of trust. It is innate. You know, it's an innate intuition. And so people think they have intuition. No, you actually are your intuition. Your intuition is your collective self. All those people who think they have spirit guides, they think they're talking to extraterrestrials. No, it is your collective self. But we don't realize it because we're in a box of linear time. When in any moment of your life, you can step out of linear time. It depends if the moment likes to dance that way or not. You know. And of course, we're an energetic expression. There isn't much you can do about that. You know, you are a sort of energetic creature. You can choose to align to certain efficient patterns of so you maintain your health, or you, in some sense, choose to deviate. There's usually, it's kind of like Robert Frost, you know, and he took the less path less traveled by. And now in 2019, when I look at people and I realize how many of their actions and beliefs are from the past, it's as if we can never see the future because we're doing the same thing as the past did. You know, we can never bring the future like that. So what it means is a new arena, or a new kind of paradigm of internal freedom needs to occur in human beings. And I don't know how this is going to happen. I just know that it must, you know, because there's no other way. There's no other options. You know, it's either all our heads get plugged into one computer in the future and we all get controlled in a certain way. So then we find a sort of efficient paradise that way, you know, where it's going to be hollow, but it's going to be at least an efficient utopic kind of situation where we're all governed by one external mind. Or you, in some sense, move internally and realize nature's mind. And nature's mind is beyond thought. That's the whole thing. That's why you can only speak the language of nature as an authentic presence of being. And in no other way you can hear, you know, the secret of the wind. By the way, guys, I should tell this, because these are live streams, I don't mind if anybody challenges what I'm saying. Do you know? It's like that's the chat section is there for that. So feel free to charge at me with your weapon of thought. We have to step out as a civilization out of too much of a dependency on external phenomena, because really, if the mind is doesn't open, like this is how you get to, oh man, how do I say it? If I told you your mind is not an object, you would be like, okay, then it's a subject. But if I told you your mind isn't a subject, if I told you your mind was a subject, it was not a subject, you would reach a point where I would say that is the new point. That is when the end and the beginning of the same universe is the end and beginning of the universe is one moment. When you come to that sort of nullification of specific subjective values associated to matter. That means, believe it or not, matter doesn't matter that much when there is something more than that here. I want to do something unique in this talk, guys, and I want to go into something I call a quote tunnel. I do this in some of the talks where I just bring up a list of quotes on a certain theme or a certain person, and I just read the list. And in a sense, and every quote I read, we're getting a sense of how that person's mind generated thoughts, like literally the sequence of thought their energetic being and senses expressed. So, anyways, these are quotes on language. Mark Twain says, "Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see." James Hume says, "The art of communication is the language of leadership." Maya Angelou, and she's actually a great speaker, she says, "The thing to do, it seems to me, is to prepare yourself so you can be a rainbow in somebody else's cloud. Somebody who may not look like you, may not call God the same name you call God. If they call God at all, I may not dance your dances or speak your language, but be a blessing to somebody." That's what I think. She's definitely a warm-hearted being. William Arthur Ward says, "A warm smile is the universal language of kindness." Man, a lot of language quotes have to do with smiling, and kindness, Ronald Reagan says, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help.'" Okay, that's a bit out of context of what we were saying here. Lou Rawls says, "Music is the greatest communication in the world. Even if people don't understand the language that you're singing in, they still know good music when they hear it." Okay, so I'm starting to notice these are not per se what I'm looking for. Okay, here, this one's a good quote from Maria Montessori. She says, "The development of language is part of the development of the personality, for words are the natural means of expressing thoughts and establishing understanding between people." See, like, I like that quote, Walt Disney says, of all of our inventions for mass communication, pictures still speak the most universally understood language." Okay? Radhanath Swami says, Mother Nature is always speaking. She speaks in a language understood within the peaceful mind of the sincere observer. Leopards, cobras, monkeys, rivers, and trees, they all served as my teachers when I lived as a wanderer in the Himalayan foothills. I mean, of course, when you have to run away from a leopard, that's a teaching moment. J. Donald Walter says there are realities we all share regardless of our nationality, language, or individual tastes. As we need food, so do we need emotional nourishment, love, kindness, appreciation, and support from others. Okay, you know who? We got to look at Steven Pinker. Steven Pinker is a language fanatic. Steven Pinker, language codes. Let's see what he comes up with. Okay. So guys, we're going to read some quotes from Steven Pinker. He says, I would argue that nothing gives life more purpose than the realization that every moment of consciousness is a precious and fragile gift. All our behaviors are a result of neurophysiological activity in the brain. There is no reason to believe there's any magic going on. Interesting. He says, without goals, the very concept of intelligence is meaningless. I'll argue against that. But I like that quote. Steven Pinker says, all of the violence that doesn't occur doesn't get reported on the news. Sure, there's a lot of the world. It's as if, you know how they say the internet, in the Google kind of database, it's like only a tiny percentage of the whole dark web, like of the whole internet is like kind of indexed, you know? And so what it means is it's similar, I think, with human life. Very little of people's actual things that are happening in their life gets kind of passed down, you know, in time. Steven Pinker says we are visual creatures. Visual things stay put, whereas sounds fade. Steven Pinker says babies are born with the instinct to speak, the way spiders are born with the instinct to spin webs. You don't need to train babies to speak, they just do, but reading is different. Interesting. Steven Pinker says we will never have a perfect world, but it's not romantic or naive to work toward a better one. Steven Pinker says cognitive psychology tells us that the unaided human mind is vulnerable to many fallacies and illusions because of its reliance on its memory for vivid anecdotes rather than systematic statistics. Yeah, if the mind was a thought. Steven Pinker says the idea that children are passive repositories to be shaped by their parents has been massively overstated. A child's peer group is a far greater determinant of its development and achievements than parental aspiration. Interesting. Steven Pinker says morality comes from commitment to treat others as we wish to be treated, which follows from the realization that none of us is the sole occupant of the universe. Steven Pinker says, knowing there is a world that will outlive you, there are people whose well-being depends on how you live your life, affects the way you... there are people whose well-being depends on how you live your life, affects the way you live your life, whether or not you directly experience those effects. You want to be the kind of person who has the larger view, who takes other people's interests into account, who's dedicated to the principles that you can justify, like justice, knowledge, truth, beauty, and morality. Steven Pinker says it's natural to think that living things must be the handiwork of a designer, but it was also natural to think that the sun went around the earth. Overcoming naive impressions to figure out how things really work is one of humanity's highest callings. Steven Pinker says most wars are not fought over shortages of resources such as food and water, but rather over conquest, revenge, and ideology. And yep, Steven Pinker just hit the nail on the head. He says being smarter gives you a tailwind throughout life. People who are more intelligent earn more, live longer, get divorced less, are less likely to get addicted to alcohol and tobacco, and their children live longer. Oh man, we were like so up in the mountain, now we're skydiving into the ocean, you know? Well, it depends. I find the concept of smart is situation based. But the concept of intelligence is based on just energetically how alert you are. So I can't I see what he's saying here, but I feel like it's more like his there's deeper dimensions to it. Anyways, Steven Pinker says we're living in primate heaven. We're warm, dry, we're not hungry, we don't have fleas and ticks and infections, so why are we so miserable? Wow. The world we live in, and the worlds that live in us, you know. I find when a person takes complexity, looks at complexity as if simplicity, it had to start from simplicity. It's as if any person you see, whether good or bad, they had simple roots and now they have become a sort of complexity. So the kind of like, I don't know, the kind of psychology I see in the world happening is that people are trying to be better, but they are trying to be better themselves first and then the world. And so when we put ourselves first, we devalue the collective system, I think. Just like how Steven Pinker says the child is kind of born, you know, with an instinct to kind of speak, you know, but reading is very different. That means being able to just see what you're seeing and being able to see what the world is are two different things. If I tell you what is the point of being smart when every person dies, you know, what would you say? You would say it increases the quality of your journey before you die. I would say true, but what is the ultimate outcome? And so the greatest mystery is the end. And the end cannot make sense if there is no beginning. I'm saying, Mr. Within is saying, like, guys, life and death, it's a wheel. It's a duality. It's not life or death. It is known constructs entering unknown waves. Pretty much right now, I'm a known creature speaking to you in my waking state of consciousness. The inner life and the outer life share one thing in common. They are both simultaneously existing, rendering them awarenesses of the same moment. I'm telling you, there can't be death without life. There can't be life without death. There can't be stuff without space. There can't be space without stuff. And so similarly, I'm realizing the species is like stuck in a bubble of language and has to step out of this bubble and begin to kind of see that reality is more than its thoughts make it to be. Sometimes in life, you don't know. Like right now, if I wanted to, for example, I don't know, learn carpentry. Okay, like it's as if like I would have to go to where that reality is occurring and watch the reality and eventually see how I can incorporate my attention into that, you know. We're not just building stuff in this world, we're building our lives as well. And our lives are based on the actions we take and how much these actions land across. That means I find like deep down in the psychology of the person, in order for them to relate to the world, they have to be separate from the world. Our lives and language are as separate moments. In a sense, we are not just more than who we are the value givers of life. And when you understand you give value to your life, no longer there can be any sort of judgment, whether from an invisible God or from visible people. It's as if the mind has seen what the world is and has chosen to stand in a certain way. You know? Eventually, we will get bored of physical activity. What I mean by that is that the mind will begin moving faster and faster. And the mind will move so fast that no longer a body can contain it. And when the mind has moved so fast that no longer a body can contain it, the mind's truth will be beyond birth. So I am saying, whether we like it or not, whether we like to be like a Buddhist and see incarnations, or whether we like to be like you know, somebody who, I know there's certain groups of people in the world who they feel this life is a simulation and they are a totally different being somewhere else. Like, I know people like that, you know. And in some sense, what I mean by that is that realities are deep. That means every word that I say is just the tip of the iceberg of the experiences behind it. It's a strange thing. It's kind of like, I think, how astronauts feel. They kind of, an astronaut in space pretty much feels like, okay, I definitely, you know, left the house today. Whether we like it or not, change happens. And so we have to accept change as the standard. This is why gratefulness, that mentality, makes sense, and it just realigns the person's karma. Because it's easy to resist something. It has always been easier to break something than build it. And because of this, discipline exists. It's like trying to find a freedom that cannot be taken away by material change. It's as if you suddenly acknowledge your physical existence and you're like, okay, stardust has become me, you know? And so you begin to appreciate physical reality, like literally treat you, what I said. You are your moment of being. You're not just the content in it where your attention goes. Your attention is not just being you right now, it is being the whole world as well. That means your mind, upon sensory data entering it, it is receiving it randomly and then organizing it. And what that means is the randomity of the sensory data is a world on its own. So I'm telling you, when you understand something in life, before understanding it, there was a sort of different alignment of movement of thoughts, you know, or subjective frameworks or landscapes behind your eyes. Because really, it's kind of like, I am totally convinced, you know, of course it'll be artificial technologically, but we'll reach a point where as the person speaks, every word he says, like imagine through a kind of light, visual light, like a three-dimensional light projection of every thought the person has, you know. It's as if in one angle life is telling you live as if what you see is only what is real. Another way, life is telling you, okay, after you have lived for eons for what you think is real, as if the nature of the consciousness changes as it doesn't take itself seriously. And especially in social, cultural, whenever you step out the house, you are putting on certain hats. Okay? And one of these hats is a sort of regulated creature, you know, and so you must respect law, because without law there would be no walls for there would be no respect for thought, no respect for behavior. And it's all about realizing the laws of man were built, you know, in a world where the laws of nature were there first, and nature will be unknown. It is your relationship with what you do not know, which in some sense becomes the playful, you know, tumbling of your soul, you know. Thoughts come and go. You know, there was a very wise man by the name of Sri Ramana Maharshi. What like this guy said, what this man said was, let what comes come, let what goes go, see what remains. And when you see what remains, you will step out of a world of lies. You're literally, you will realize who you are in accordance to the freedom. You see, children are born with an internal freedom that is playful, but the social system is not, the civilization has not acknowledged the proper human being. Because if it had, rather than 8 billion people trying to all align to one system, it would be the other way. We have 8 billion different DNAs, you know. We are very unique creatures in our existence. And when the world gets too messed up, the only thing you can do is just paint a new picture. That's how you live on. That's how you live for life. You are a certain energetic phenomena. What are you going to do about this? You either serve yourself or you serve the world. But when you realize that serving the world is indirectly serving yourself, then you will realize to serve the world is the greatest service you can give yourself. To make the lives of your great grandchildren easier is your greatest task. In some sense, trying to bring about systems where no longer the mind of man is chained to the past. The educational system nowadays, it is shackling the mind of kids into past beliefs. Children must explore. It's like the concept of exploration is being forgotten. That we don't know and therefore we strive. We go forth and then the knowledge appears. You have to move or nothing will change. You have to look at something different or nothing will change. And it's your choice if you want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. I personally feel we as creatures get bored. And that's why we evolved. We were bored of kind of just being there and dying. And I feel our evolutionary intelligence has to do with the this kind of endless cyclical kind of, the earth is getting a tan by the sun, you know? And so it has to do with the on and off switch mechanism. This is why our psychologies, I feel our brains develop with two hemispheres, you know? It had to do with the environment. The shape of the brain is reflecting the universal design. It's like night and day. When it became night, the creature was like, oh my god, it bunkered itself. It increased its defenses. But in the day, it was offensive, you know? So in the day when you live, the intention is like, the mindset is like, okay, I'm expressing, and so the being is expressive, okay. But at night you become less expressive, you know. It's as if kind of the human being becoming quieter and quieter as it became night. But in the day, it had more freedom. And this kind of on and off switch of the light in the room of the cosmos, as long, you know, at least for how you can consider human beings, it had an influence in the psychology of just this evolutionary purpose. You know, it's as if kind of like this on and off switch of light hitting the surface of the planet as it's spinning. It's kind of a crazy design, no? It's like out of emptiness, there are orbs sphering. There's orbs orbiting. I've written this thing. It's still unpublished, remains unpublished, but it's called God Likes Spheres. I hope this talk has served you. You know, there are this life. There's so much left to it, and consciousness. It is a decision. This is why you cannot move without, on some level, being responsible for movement. If any time you you don't become responsible for what moves in your moment, you in some sense forget the world. When you fail a couple times and you feel you can't go anymore, you might stop attempting, you know? Anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. Much blessings and namaste. And the inner life of a outer world is the elegance of how the presence of the moment is being the personality of the being. Enjoy the dance of a lifetime.